okay? Food does not contain ingredients. Food is ingredients, right? Am I right? So again, bring it back to the table. Now, cleanliness really matters when we are looking at food. So if you're going into the supermarket, I'm actually going to show you exactly what to look for so that you know your produce is clean and which things you can afford to eat non-organic. So as a piece of homework, I want you to write down, but I will put it in the newsletter when I send it out as your homework, to look up Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 on the EWG, or Environmental Working Group's website. This website is going to be a great resource. It's fantastic. Everything you ever wanted to know about the cleanliness of your food and the products you put on your body are going to be found at EWG. They work for you. They're a consumer working group. Now, they have a list called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And the Dirty Dozen are 12 of the dirtiest fruits and vegetables you should never eat unless they're organic. And then they have a list of the Clean 15, which you can eat from freely because they typically do not get sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, or anything like that. We're going to look at, what do the numbers on your produce mean? Did anybody ever notice there were numbers on there? Well, there are, and I'm going to show you what those mean. Toxic strawberries. Let's just put it this way, okay? If I can make this stick in your mind tonight, this one thing, I will be doing a great service to everybody here tonight. There are things that are sprayed on fruit. Some fruits have up to 36 different pesticides and fungicides, things to prevent molds, and just things that are really horrendous and wreak complete havoc in our bodies, all the way from causing cancer to making people sterile. Glyphosate, which is sprayed on a lot of crops, which is basically Roundup. And by the way, nobody should be using that stuff in their yard. It is deadly. They're spraying this on your food, and you and your kids are eating a bunch of chemicals with very little nutrition. Oh, those strawberries are beautiful. But you know what? They're not half the nutrition that you could get in a clean strawberry. They might be a little bit smaller, but they're not like fruit on steroids. It's really fruit, you know, just as nature intended it. And some of the dirtiest fruits there are peaches, apples, and strawberries, cherries, and nectarines. And this is the time of year when we see an abundance of those. So I'm going to show you why those foods should never be eaten unless they're organic, and how to find that on the label. Two of those, strawberries being one of them, has 2 toxins on them that have actually been shown to be chemically castrating frogs that are in the area these pesticides are sprayed. So when we look at people that we all know, we've all probably heard of couples who are infertile. A lot of the infertility we see comes from these chemicals in our food and in our environment. We don't want to be doing this to our kids if we want grandchildren. So it's very important that we spend the money on those important things. The other thing is that veggies should be half your plate. So what's on the other half of the plate? I'm not going to tell you right now. That's coming up in a future training. But veggies should be half your plate. Plant materials should make up the majority of our diet. And we will be talking about what other things will be making up the balance. So when I said that when you go into the store, you're going to look at your fruits and vegetables, and you're going to see that each one of them has a tag. Now on the tag, it's going to say, the number 4 is 4, and it's going to be a 4-digit number starting with 4, typically. Okay, that means it's a conventionally grown vegetable or fruit when it starts with a 4-digit code. What does conventionally grown mean? Conventionally grown means it's loaded with pesticides, herbicides. It could very well be genetically modified. We don't know, but typically it's just going to tell you that it's conventionally grown. And most produce is conventionally grown, doused with chemicals, okay? Now, organic will start with a 9 in front of that 4-digit number, and that's how you know that something's organic. Typically, the sign in the store will say organic, you know, whatever, broccoli. But that is how you know. If you don't have a sign, there'll be a 9 at the front of that if it is. And if that particular food is genetically modified, then that 5-digit code will begin with an 8. Okay, so that's how when you're looking at produce, you know. So when you look at the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, it's going to correlate to which foods are mostly organic, which foods are not clean and should be avoided, but this is something that will help you with the labels. Some of the other things that cause havoc with our health, and we will get into cholesterol a bit more, but cholesterol is not the culprit that people think it is. The thing that's bad about cholesterol is it oxidizes. That's when all the problems happen. So how and what oils oxidize? Well, I'm going to tell you the ones that do and the ones that are very inflammatory in your diet, and probably one of the things that we should be removing as soon as possible to reduce inflammation and better our health. And those would be canola, corn oil, safflower, sunflower, and peanut oils mainly. Now, when we remove packaged and processed foods, typically you won't be getting these oils in anything because they're only used typically in processed foods. Some of these are the majority of the oils that are used in salad dressings. So if you buy a bottled salad dressing, aside from the fact it might be in a plastic bottle and leaching hormone disrupting chemicals into your food, there's also probably a little fib going on that label. Now, it might say that this salad dressing has olive oil, but I can tell you that the majority of salad dressings on the market do not contain real olive oil. It's a blend of canola with the smallest amount of olive oil, and it's overly processed, and there's really no health benefits. When it comes to salad dressing, make your own. I recommend a quality olive oil, and I will actually put a link when I send you this webinar to find some quality ones. If you're local to the area of Florida or Publix or most supermarkets, if you're out of the country, I'm really not sure what you have available, but if you email me, I'll see if I can find out which ones are clean. Otherwise, if you're able to get something, you can even get the products I recommend from Amazon, but I'll tell you what they are. They are definitely 100% not fake olive oil, and they're very clean. So we want to be eating clean, healthy fats. These are inflammatory. These would be a definite no for anybody who wants better health. So again, you're going to find them in a lot of packaged foods. Choose instead coconut oil, walnut oil, avocado oil, ghee, butter, even beef and bacon renderings. See, cholesterol is not the issue. It's the inflammation and the oxidation of damaging fats and sugars. So when we remove most of the damaging foods, then you remove most of the inflammation, and metabolically you will begin to become more healthy. Now, these are the best oils for cooking and eating and heating, which would be coconut oil, duck fat, beef renderings, avocado oil, and grass-fed butter. And right about now, you're all probably scratching your head saying, I thought this was going to be about healthy food. Well, I'm going to be showing you how this food is actually very healthy for all of our metabolic processes. And there are studies that are suggesting that this is absolutely the case. The thing with these fats is that they don't oxidize. And you have been led to believe a lie for very many years. We'll talk about why in our next training. But for now, a couple of things to say about using these oils. Coconut oil is great to cook with. It's a metabolism booster. It's antimicrobial. It has tons and tons of beautiful applications for humans. So I would use that as often as possible, and it cooks to just under 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Avocado oil is another really good one for high heat, but to be perfectly honest with you, anytime I need to cook at high heat, it is animal fat, whether it's bacon grease, duck fat, grass-fed butter, or ghee, because they don't oxidize. And that is the most important thing. So fats, not the villains that they've been cut out to be, but no worries, we're going to bust that myth in our next training. And I think you'll be pretty surprised. Okay, so let me first begin by saying this. I think some of the people who will be influenced the most and helped the most from this training are the vegans and the vegetarians, because I'm going to show you the healthiest way on the planet to eat without meat. And all of a sudden, health issues can begin to improve, or health decrease, and your health can begin to improve, and you can get your metabolism back on track. Vegetarianism and veganism usually have two major flaws in what is eaten. Typically because most people are eating the majority of plants, they don't eat meats, that there's very little else to venture out into if you want any kind of variety. So a lot of people take to soy, which is a metabolism killer. If you're on the soy, it's very important, really, that be one of the things you cut out of your diet for several reasons. Aside from the fact that almost every bit of soy on the planet is GMO, there's very little that's organic and whole and natural. It's really not good to tempt fate. A lot of cancers are estrogen dependent, meaning that they feed off of estrogens. And soy is called a phytoestrogen, meaning that to your body, it kind of looks like estrogen. So in that sense, it can fuel estrogen dependent cancers. It is probably not the way that you would want to manage hot flashes or other things of that nature. It's definitely very risky, and the science is really pointing towards, if is it healthy or is it not healthy? It's kind of on the not healthy. The other thing with this, and also raw diets, the problem with a raw diet is nutrient absorption diminishes in some vegetables unless they are cooked or lightly steamed. Let's take seaweed, for example. If you found seaweed before it ever made it into the sea, which wouldn't really be possible, but just bear with me for a minute, it's going to be a different chemical structure than seaweed that has been sitting in the ocean sucking up minerals for years and years and years and years, okay? Same thing with some vegetation. Some vegetation, when it gets heated and wilts, if it's out in the field, or it rains and then it gets very hot and wilts, it's actually more, the nutrients are more available when the cell wall of some of these plants are broken down. So a lot of people who do raw diets are actually not doing themselves a favor. They're unable to absorb a lot of the nutrients in that food because a lot of the food really does need to be somewhat cooked and broken down before it's eaten to be beneficial. Now, they're also unable to get adequate nutrition that's critical to proper cell metabolism. What do I mean by that? Well, most vegetarians and vegans, and I do have a son who's vegan, so I really understand the ethical reasons behind a lot of some people's decisions not to eat meat. But what I have to tell you is that it's very interesting to know that the forms of B12 especially, and B6, can only be found in animal products that actually correctly work in the body. And that's a fact. So if we're going to be healthy and we're not necessarily going to eat meat, in order to be extremely healthy, you really need to stick with the right type of B vitamin. Okay, vitamin D, omega-3s, those are all things as well that need to be put into the diet. Most of the time our diets are too high in what's called omega-6s and not enough omega-3s. So we want to add those back in. Sorry about that. Now, why not grains? Well, you'll hear me talk a lot about the fact that, first of all, they're GMO. No human being can break down gluten. Every person will show symptoms at some time in their life of exposure to gluten because we just don't have the enzymes to break them down. It's not part of our ancestral diet. So the problem with that is it's mostly from wheat, rye, and barley. But, rice and oatmeal may have some gluten, but they're typically not the ones that cause problems. But any grain will raise our blood sugar. So it depends on where you're at with your health as to whether you should want to include things like quinoa or oatmeal or rice every once in a while, or if you decide that, your blood sugar or you're on medication, then you might not want to do that. But it was really not part of our ancestral diet. What really was just those, parts of animal, fish, fowl, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. So that's really an ancestral diet, and adding some fats in there. That is the way that we are really going to be moving towards. And I will help personalize it a bit for everybody when the time comes. What I wanted to point out is this. Some people just are not going to be able to wrap their mind around the fact that I'm going to be talking a lot about fat, how important it is, how it's going to make you thin, how it's going to help you metabolically, and all the wonderful things that eating fat does. Especially if you're probably in your 50s or over, you're going to say, no, I just don't know if I can do that. Well, let's take a quick look at something. Since the 1970s, when the low-fat diet and the food pyramid came out, we're looking at really in 1986, if we look at obesity rates, they were starting to climb. Okay, by 1994, even the states that had lower obesity rates were starting to climb. Because I can tell you, a lot of these people heeded the warning and they decided they would take on this low-fat diet and avoid saturated fat and eggs and butter, and that's what we were being fed at the time. And this is what we are seeing. Now, in 2002, the CDC put out some pretty startling statistics. If you look here, we actually had to add on to the percentages of obese people in our nation because it was getting so bad. And if you'll take notice also, the Deep South has some of the worst outcomes that there are anywhere in the USA. And now looking in 2009, we're looking at greater than 30%. Now in 2016, it is 50 to 60%. This is no joke. In some places, if you look, overall as a nation, it's definitely up there. And this kind of goes by state, just to give you an idea, in 2015. Florida, we did 25.9. Colorado, healthiest state by far. So we are covered tonight the role of healthy whole foods. I'm going to give you some homework so you can find out what the dirty dozen and the clean 15 are. And when we're eating our veggies and cooking those things for our family, we want to make sure they're clean. They're the healthiest we can afford to buy in season. We're looking at clean meats. We want to be eating meats that are typically not as processed. Something like a grass-fed beef or a bison or a duck or chicken. Pheasant is great. Fish is great. Fowl. Those types of things are what we're going to be talking about mainly in the diet, and the cleanest sources available, which we will cover again when we get there. So those are the staples. I will help you take all of this and decide where you want to fit in the puzzle with your carb content, but I'm going to be coaching you on two really important things. What is a macro, and what is the ideal ratio of proteins, carbs, and fats for the majority of humans? We will be able to tailor and individualize some of this to you personally, especially for the vegans and vegetarians. But there are some people who are diabetic or blood sugar issues who may want to sort of do this in steps. I'm going to give you a lot of tools to be able to get into this best state of metabolism in the quickest ways possible. So I'm going to be sharing an awful lot with you. I really want to thank you for coming today and spending your time with me. This will be in your inbox. Again, if you want to look at some more articles or some more interesting video, you can go to www.biohackingwellness.com, and you can read a vast majority of things on health topics and some nice videos there. Or you can just head on over to YouTube and type in Biohacking Wellness, and I have a lot of videos over there, especially dealing with what I just sent you a free gift in the email previously on Time for Change. And this is about changing behaviors and kind of what it takes to get your head in the game when it comes to changing behaviors. So I hope you guys had a good night. You liked this. It was helpful. The more that we get into this, the more fun we're going to have. I'm going to be talking about what is a macro, and we're going to be talking about fats, fasting, fermentation, and a bunch of other fun things. So your homework is to check your inbox tomorrow. I'll be sending you just a few little links for you to look at that support everything we talked about tonight, and then we can move forward. I will see you next Wednesday on July 13th, I believe it is, at 7:30 p.m. Have a good evening. This is Sandra Miller, and thank you so much for joining me tonight.